Okay, welcome everybody to this really, really exciting episode here of Hive Live. I am here with Kristen, who, as you all know, has been our artist in residence all throughout the in period of Lent here. And what she has brought has inspired me, has given me just like such food for thought. And since I love icons, she's also given me a new gateway into prayer. So that's a lot. I know that's just me personally, let alone what you're bringing to the whole Hive community. So, Kristen, just first and foremost, a huge thank you for your vision and gift. What a treasure.
Thank you. It's,
Pleasure.
if you had told me a year ago that I'd be sharing about my visions, I probably would have thought you were lying. uh, but I kept hearing, people will hear it and understand it when they're ready. And now is the time. So,
Amen. Beautiful. So, tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey, and especially, the vision piece is intriguing.
so I'm actually an Episcopal communicator for two churches here in the Diocese of Louisiana, one for a rather small church and one for a large church. So like two totally different, communications, everything for that. So I've got liturgy down pretty well.
Nice.
As far as that goes. Yes. And I'm actually in the process of becoming a deacon. So I start seminary in the fall. I moved from aspirant to postulant, so it's a little step up on my journey. So I think I've been in the process for 3.5 years, something like that. So, it's never in our time; it's all in its time. So.
Thank you for your faithfulness on that. The church needs you to be a deacon. This is great. And we were talking a little bit earlier. I'd love for you to describe why a deacon and not a priest, because I think that's an important part of why we're here today.
Right. So I get asked this question a lot, and I'd love to delve further into this discussion, like maybe get a group of us from the Hive together and really delve deep into this, because I don't think that people talk about it enough.
Agreed.
And my response to people when they ask me that question is usually, why a doctor and not a nurse?
Right.
Because I equate it to the same thing. Nurses get asked why a doctor and not a nurse, but a doctor doesn't get asked why a doctor and not a nurse. A priest doesn't get asked. Well, most priests that I've talked to don't get asked why a priest and not a deacon. It's always the other way around, as if it's less than. And it's not. You're working together. A friend of mine used a really good analogy, and he'd probably kill me for using this, but I think it's just perfect. And he said the church is like a gas station. So the priest is the proprietor of the gas station, and he's going up to people who come to the gas station and filling their tanks. Where a deacon fills up the tank and takes it out to the people on the side of the road that are out of gas and, fill it up. So, and I added that part. He just talked about the priest part. I said, ooh, a deacon's like filling up the gas and taking it to people. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that's so apt, because it's this idea of how beautifully it works in tandem. And of course, that each one of us has a vocation, and so, and no order, be it layperson, be it deacon, be it priest, be it bishop, no one is higher than the other. In fact, it's reverse order, right? Laity is always first anyway. So I agree with you. This is it's an important corrective.
Every priest is ordained a deacon first.
Yep, that's right.
So there's a reason for that, is because there was deacons first.
Amen.
So that's where that comes from. And then also, now that I've gotten into iconography and studying Mary Magdalene in particular, and finding that she is my patron saint. Because side note, I grew up in the Catholic Church and I went to Catholic school, and we were given a saint, like, this is your patron saint. And I don't agree with that. After studying iconography, I believe you don't find your patron until later in life, when you really know and like resonate with someone. It's not because your name matches. It can be, but it's not because of that, and finding out that Mary is my patron saint, and she was the first Christian. She was the first deacon. She was the first person going out in the world and preaching to people and gathering them to Christ. So that's a big part of my call to deaconhood.
I think there's something beautiful in that, and the idea too of a patron. saints can pray with us. And what's so beautiful about it is I think as you grow in your relationship with the saints, there's this idea that it's like, oh, you're finding out who's been praying with you this whole time. You've been,
Mhm.
and there's something really holy about that, and not something to just be, assigned. So I think there's something very wise about that. Yeah. So tell us how you learned she was your patron.
So she was, I want to say, okay, I'm on my 27th icon right now. My 27th saint. She was my fourth. So at this point is when I really started studying, like getting into their stories as part of the process of writing their icon.
Mhm.
Because as you know, we say writing and not painting. Story for another day. Yep. Admonition to a class, maybe.
That sounds good to me. Stay tuned, folks.
For that. But yeah, so I studying her, I realized, okay, this part in the process of my my call, and this was also, about a month or two into the pandemic last year. And I'm studying her and I'm realizing that everything I learned about Mary was wrong.
Yep.
Everything I learned, not calling out the Catholic Church, just calling out the Catholic Church I grew up in. We're taught that Mary was a prostitute. Mary was the sister of Lazarus, and Mary was the person at Jesus's feet, crying and wiping his feet with her tears, right? And what I discovered in this epiphany is that a very patriarchal bishop in the 500s by the name of Pope Gregory, decided that it would be easier in his sermon if he could just like take all those Marys. They must be the same person,
Sure.
because she's a woman. Her name's
Aren't
Mary.
women all the same anyway? Just kind of lump them
They're
together,
all the
right? They're
same.
the same. Yeah.
They're all prostitutes anyway, right? Um, yeah, we can say that it's part of the story. So he he melded all of them together into one, and he delivered this sermon and everybody took it as gospel, quite literally. And from that point on, the church
Yep.
has recognized her as one person, when really it's three totally different stories of totally different people. And Mary was just as common of a name as John is today. So and then so it's finding out like that lie and reversing it. And there's a lot of things we're never going to know. I mean, even though the Bible, we see that as as Episcopalians, we see that as stories and we learn from them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you take it literally, which is a totally different totally another conversation with that, that's what Pope Gregory did, was taking that literal and just saying, oh, they're all the same person. And they're not. So you have to really, one of the things I talk about in my iconography class is taking what we know of the saints, right, and marrying that with our intuition,
Yes. Yes.
because that's the only way that we can come up with some semblance of truth, because we weren't there. We weren't witness to that. And it's a lot like the game of telephone when you were a kid. You start at one end of the line and then someone would say something, and by the time you get to the other end, it's a completely different story.
Right.
And I feel like with a lot of saints, that's the case.
Yes, I think so. And I think in particular, the female saints often get painted as, my New Testament teacher used to say, they either had demons or diamonds, right? They were either famous for being, very, very healed after having some sort of mental illness, perhaps, and
Seven
or
demons.
yep, yep, or they like a demon possession, or they were like a rich patron who was very virginal, right? Like those are kind of the only types of saints you sometimes get. And even when you peel back that veneer even more, you realize, oh, actually, these are some of the most incredible people of faith who've ever lived, and their stories are worth actually not only diving into for what we know, but as an invitation, as you're saying,
Yeah,
for the imaginative relationship, and say, figuring out, well, what would it have been like for her, and
right,
how much bravery would it have taken for her to do X, Y,
right.
and Z? So that's the invitation of the icon in
And
general.
not only that, but especially in Mary Magdalene's time, biblical times, right? The the courage it took Jesus to
Yes.
even speak to a woman in public, which was against the law at the time. I mean, he really stepped up and said, none of this stuff matters. She's a person just like me. He looked at women as equal, and no one was doing that at the time. That's why it was such a big deal for him to have followers that were women, and we don't talk about that enough, because the church just says, passes them off as these like secondary characters in the stories. And it's like, Mary was chosen to be the first witness. You cannot convince me otherwise that wasn't planned and purposeful, that a woman was the first.
Absolutely. And even when you think of what witnesses were in her time frame, you were not allowed to be a witness as a woman, so your testimony wouldn't even be listened to, let alone valid. And
Right.
so Jesus is saying through Mary's witness that I choose everyone to see me. I choose this to be, an open witnessing, and I trust her to tell the story, even if the rest of the world doesn't trust her testimony. Something so powerful about that. And
Yeah.
as we're approaching closer to Easter, I think that's the invitation. So I'd love to ask you this: iconography, and you've mentioned it. We're writing an icon, we're not painting an icon, right? That's because an icon itself is an invitation into a story. I feel,
Right.
and
Mhm.
so when you're creating icons, how is it enlivening your faith? What are you hoping the story invitation is for people who are praying with them? Tell us a little bit about your experience with your icons.
Well, it's funny, and I'll try to keep this short because I could talk about this. I could talk about this all day long. Like, my husband is like, "Oh, who are we talking about this week?" It's all I talk about, my poor husband. But and it's funny when he starts getting in the stories or he remembers them, and I'm like, you were listening. So ever since my second icon, the first one I did was Jesus of the Sacred Heart, and that's for me. I kept him. He's the original is mine. But from that point forward, every saint that I've written has been a commission.
Mm-hmm.
So the saint has come to me through someone else. And every saint, I could tell you a story, and I will in my class in the future. I could tell you a story of how that saint came into my life at a specific time, a specific week, for a specific reason. And I say week because this has only been a year that I've been doing this.
Right, right.
And between April of last year and today, I've read, I counted like 63 books. Yeah. Books, Audible, Kindle, like all of it. And it's just like consumed my life. Sometimes I'm just like, can y'all stop? Can you hold up? Like, give me a break here, And when I say the saints speak to me, I don't say it jokingly,
Yeah.
I'm just more open about talking about those visions and realizing that, no, I'm not crazy. So if my therapist, my spiritual director, my priest say, you're good, you're not crazy, I'm like, all right, I'm good.
That's pretty good. Yeah. I'd be like, can somebody put that in writing for me so I can hang it on my wall, please?
My
Yeah.
priest, my therapist, and my spiritual
Y'all
director.
find this document. I need proof. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, so I try to remind myself of that, and that it was just time to share that. So as far as the saints go, kind of like reeling it back into that, is that they each speak to me individually. One of the things I talked about in my hagiography class, which I did a little snippet of in last week's video,
Check
is
it
kind
out.
of my
It's a great
process.
video.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
My process of studying, and part of that process is speaking directly to the saints and what are they wanting me to share, because I don't do traditional iconography. I appreciate it and I love it, but as my spiritual director says, you're too much of an artist to copy other people's work. Like, it has to be your own. And my call, part of my call, is to bring those saints and their lives in a new and unique way that invites people to reinterpret those stories, revisit those stories, because I have plenty of friends of all different faiths, beliefs, non-beliefs, everything from Buddhist to atheist and everything in between. And every single one of them can resonate with a saint. And we have to remind ourselves of that they're holy figures, but they're not just holy to us. You know,
Mhm.
their stories are holy to so many people, people that don't even believe, you
Yes.
know, they because they are real people with real stories that people can grasp onto and understand. And when they have that visual piece to marry with that, then you
Mm.
know that speaks to people. So
I love it. It's a way of communicating the story and inviting the story to continue. It
yes,
really makes me think too. Your conversations and prayer with saints. I think it bears us mentioning that for those of us who maybe haven't grown up Roman Catholic, the communion of saints is this very ancient and time honored tradition in Christianity that is, I think, sometimes misunderstood by people who've perhaps been in a more Protestant tradition.
right,
You might say something like, "Oh, you're not supposed to pray to saints." Well, what I love about an icon is it's actually it's showing the right intention for prayer, where we're not praying to anybody but Jesus. We're praying alongside these saints. They're
yeah,
praying with us. You know, we are entering into the communion that they're in. It's very cosmic and also very sacramental. You know, at
yeah,
every Eucharist, we say we join with the saints and the angels, right? It's a part of our, it's better to think of them as our ancestors, I think,
yeah.
than us somehow turning them into an idol, which is, nobody's suggesting that we're doing
Right, exactly. And that's a good point to bring up too, because people tend to bring that up as like, oh well, you're venerating the saint above all else. And it's like, no, the saying of two or more are gathered, right? And
Yes.
that could be you alone in your room along with Mary Magdalene. That's two or more people gathered.
Yep.
God is there speaking with you. Jesus is there speaking with you. And I feel strongly about that. Like, even I could be alone on my porch right now and talking to Mary, and Jesus is right there.
That's
You
right.
know
That's,
how
yep.
that works. So
It's beautiful. It really is one of the great gifts of our faith, is to not have to feel alone, right? You know,
yeah,
we have people from time that cross time and space to keep us company in our vigil with God. And I think there's
right.
something really holy about that.
Yeah.
Truly. Oh, thank you so, so much. Well, as you've already mentioned, there'll be more to come with you and the Hive, not only through Lent but into the future. So, folks, stay tuned. I'm really looking forward to what will be even more. Are there any parting words that you'd like for us to know, either for the series or just in our prayer life and with icons in general?
Just something I say to everybody: your visions are real.
Yes.
Don't denounce them, don't self-deprecate.
Yep.
They're real, and listen to them, listen to your voices, and that comes from Joan of Arc. So
Yeah. Oh, absolutely right. What a great icon there. And what's I think so powerful about that message and bringing in the saints is that when you have a vision, sometimes I think we don't share them because we think we're, somebody's going to call us crazy or whatever. And yet the sharing of the vision is how we get discernment around it. It's how it
mhm,
actually turns from just what we'd like to see happen into actual reality. So I so agree. Like, don't hide a vision. It's the thing, that helps us keep going in life.
yeah.
Great. Kristen, thank you so much. What a
No,
delight it's been talking with you today, and just what a delight it is to have you as part of the Hive community. Thank you
thanks.
for
It's an
sharing
honor
it.
to be part of it. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Many blessings. Bye, Hive.